Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're now on Red Circle as well as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Five Reasons YouTube channel. If you're there, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on because we got plenty of content that's not just Heat. We cover the other teams in town as well, including the 94 win pace at the halfway point, Miami Marlins. All right. Also, check us out on fivereasonsports.com. Make sure you spell that one out. We don't have a paywall, unlike the newspapers. And check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. That includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. They do not have rollovers. This is our daily fantasy partner. And our daily gambling partner is Better Edge. We've got a contest going up there later today. Go to betteredge.com. Use the code 5RSN. So that's Prize Picks. Both of these, by the way, are legal in the state of Florida and just about every other state. So this is not funny money. And you don't have to deal with the other issues that you deal with the other gambling and fantasy apps. So go to prizepicks.com, use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Better Edge, use the code 5RSN, get $20 to play. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yikes. Five on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. And we got Bryan Fonseca. You can follow him at Bryan Fonseca NY. We do not hold that against him here. Of course, you heard Bryan many times, like you heard Sean on the Five on the Floor post-game show, particularly when we were at the home games, me, Brady, and Alex. We've been waiting to tee this one up for a little while. And again, we don't want you to think that we're saying that Dame Lillard is definitely not going to happen, because we don't know that. Nobody knows that. Everybody on ESPN, I was listening again today. It's actually kind of fun to watch them at the moment because they're actually pushing for something to happen to Miami. And again today, Tim Legler, who's one of the voices there that I actually respect, said, Dame, you got to get out of there. We want to see you compete for something legitimate. Everybody is on the free Dame movement right now. There doesn't seem to be any reason other than his, I mean, it's better for him. It's better for Portland if they separate. It seems just that he wants to be, I don't know, loved on the way out the door or something like that. And it already seems like that's going to happen regardless. So, I mean, I don't really, I think most people's frustrations are not with him leaving. They're with all this hesitating. But we're going to see how this plays out over the next week. But what if it's not Dame, right? So yesterday we did an episode with Sean Rochester and Alex Toledo where we went into some of the low-budget options they could sign, including about 6 former Heat players, if they end up trading for Dame. But what if they don't make the trade for Dame because either Portland doesn't want him, or Dame or want the players that the Heat, or the picks that the Heat have to offer, the assets that the Heat have to offer, or because Dame simply never asks out here. So we're going to go through the list. And Bryan, I know you have a list, so let's go through some of these. What are the non-Dame options that could still significantly improve a team that is struggling up against the luxury tax?
So first, I think you have to look at some teams that you could actually pivot to, right? I think Washington still wants to do some things. I think the Rockets, clearly given by their activity or expected activity in free agency, they're going to want to do some things. The Pacers are interesting. The Spurs, the Thunder, maybe. Utah, I think, is a team they're going to circle to definitely if that happens. Probably Charlotte, and maybe a Dallas if Kyrie Irving walks out the door.
So basically, Bryan, all current non-contenders, right? Even including Dallas, because Dallas didn't even make the play-in last year.
Though they want to contend, I feel like, even if Kyrie walks
right,
out.
But most of the teams we're talking about, I mean, are sort of in that rebuilding mode. Houston, Charlotte, San Antonio, Utah's maybe a little further along in their rebuild.
Yeah.
OKC, Washington. I mean, most of these we're talking about the bottom third of the league, basically.
The Clippers. And the Clippers.
Except for the Clippers.
And you have to look at, I feel like you have to look at teams. If Tyler Hero is going to be involved in any of these, and he doesn't have to be necessarily, but if he is, and if that's going to be one of your chips to swing a big role player deal, that contract, I don't think it's going to appeal to contenders. I think it's going to appeal to rebuilding teams, and particularly teams who can't draw free agents, who could talk themselves into, okay, young guy who's 23, who can score, who's going to be on this type of contract. Like, that could appeal to some teams. I don't think it has a ton of value, especially with like the Clippers, for example, where that's a team that I think they could do business with. But I think that's more you're sending Kyle Lowry for a couple forwards. Maybe you throw in Duncan Robinson to make it a bigger deal. But I don't think Tyler Hero is going to wind up a Clipper. I think he's going to wind up with a rebuilding team, which might be his destiny anyway.
That might be his destiny even in a Dame Lillard trade. We've talked about that.
Exactly.
Probably
if they do the Damian Lillard trade, like that's worth mentioning. If they do the Damian Lillard trade, I've always felt like that's going to be a 3 or 4 team deal. That Tyler Hero's not going to wind up in Portland. He's going to go somewhere else because Portland has Anthony Simons, who some would say is better. I wouldn't, but Anthony Simons is cheaper. He is that. He's slightly cheaper on a year-to-year basis.
Not better.
And they play, I don't think he's better, but they play the same position. They do the same, like, right. You know, it's redundant with both of them. So I think Tyler Hero winds up on a third team, be it one of the teams we just mentioned anyway.
All right. So let's give our guy Barry Jackson some credit, because he's done some mining on this too. You can follow him at FLA Sports Buzz. He does pretty much 50% of the content for the Miami Herald these days. He had the Clippers. Marcus Morris, a player that we've talked about, like, I feel like ad infinitum over the past 4 years. Robert Covington, who can't seem to stay in the rotation out there for Ty Lue, and I know there's some frustration among Clippers fans. So there, and Terrence Mann, who kind of popped in the playoffs a couple of years ago, but hasn't really taken the upward trajectory from that point. And this would be essentially for the Kyle Lowry contract, which the Heat did come out yesterday. I reported it, and Barry reported it, that they're not going to be waving, stretching him. So those who were doubting me first. I mean, well, it's not even the having it first. It's more the irritation of everybody coming at me telling me I'm wrong, and then an hour later it's confirmed. But that's I don't care about having things first. But again, I forgot we're hiding things off the floor. That's right. Okay. By the way, you can subscribe there for $3.05 a month, and you would have gotten it 3 hours before I put it on Twitter. Because I was hiding it. So Kyle Lowry and sweeteners, right? Like Kyle, does this make sense for either side?
I think the part of it with the Clippers is that they want to cost cut, just like kind of Miami does. They need to balance their books. So I think like a swap with Lowry for equal salaries, it does neither team any financial good. So I think we should back up just a moment.
Okay.
And I want to say this, that if Dame doesn't happen, there is so many variables that we don't and cannot have the ability to assess and talk about today. For instance, you don't know where teams are going to switch, like free agents are going to leave, and then you're going to have new suitors for players via trade. You don't know if there's a situation where, like Indiana, for instance, with this news from Mark Stein, that they are basically throwing up $16 million per 3 year, $48 million per deal, or $48 million deal at Max Strus. What if the Heat can figure out a sign and trade for one of their young players, or TJ McConnell, a Jimmy Butler favorite? There's ways of using Depot's contract. They have the Dedmon trade exception that we don't think they're going to use. But if they end up not doing anything with Dame, maybe that is the move, is to like just get a low salary, not a $4 million player, but a smaller salary player. So I just think there can be subtle moves, like Pat mentioned in the press conference, that are like Depot related, where you're talking a $10 million salary, or there's these bigger iterations, as Brian alluded to, where you have Hero, which that's going to take a ton for Miami to get Hero involved if we're not talking Dame, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's more about using those expiring contracts, and maybe you have to sacrifice an asset or two now to make sure this group is better. I mean, what are we really doing here? Are we going to bring back the same team, less max, and say that they're better? I just don't think that that's viable. And it doesn't, also with Kyle, to just like cut bait on Kyle, who is Jimmy's best friend, etc. What messages are we sending? So I do think that there's other options, but there's just so many variables that we're not going to be able to hit on exactly the right deal. But these other ones, like the Jazz, Sexton and Kelly Olynyk for Lowry, Or the Raptors, maybe they want a heartfelt reunion like Dwayne with Trent Jr. and Boucher for Lowry and a pick. These are all from Barry Jackson, mind you. San Antonio, Doug McDermott and Devontae Graham for Kyle Lowry. So there are different deals out there that I think could make sense for the Heat, but I just would caution everyone, like, how is Jimmy Butler going to absorb Devontae Graham and Doug McDermott, coming back for Kyle Lowry? Does he love that? And if he doesn't, I think they could be inclined to hold there. So I hate to be a wet blanket. Shout out to Tropical Blanket. I just don't know that that unless they're going to cut salary, how they can really expect to cash in on these expirings, because they're not going to want to pay that ultimate team payroll. So that's just what I would caution everyone on expectations.
All right. Well, to go through Barry's 4 here, Brian, the one that I like best from a talent and fit perspective would be the Utah deal. To get Sexton and KO, where Sexton, there still is some upside there. And, again, if you end up moving on from Tyler, then Sexton gives you another option there, either as a starter or a 6-man type, maybe 6th or 7th man type. And we know that Heat players would be happy with KO coming back, like particularly Jimmy and Bam, that was a push before the trade deadline, and they did investigate that last year. It was obviously not just the familiarity, but also just fit. We know that the Bam KO lineups were always good. He's not an elite rebounder, but he gives you some of that spacing, and he's not an elite defender, but he seems to know how to be in the right place. And I feel like they would be, and they just personally like him too. You mentioned it on the Lowry stuff. I'm with you that it has to be the right thing. I thought what was kind of interesting was in Barry's article after the reports came out that they wouldn't be stretching him. Barry didn't say they would be keeping him. Right. He said they would hold him. They would either try to trade him now or hold him and see what materializes at the trade deadline. If Kyle comes to camp and is going to be part of this team again, this is going to be awkward again. Because I think everybody knows that he's going to be moved at some point. So it's almost better to kind of rip the Band-Aid off now, I think, than to hold him, even if there may be some advantages to waiting. Any thoughts on these 4 deals, Clippers, Jazz, Raptors, San Antonio, Brian, or any others that you want to kind of throw in the mix here?
The Utah one is interesting because it plugs 2 holes. Sexton gives you another creator, and Kelly Olynyk. We obviously know what Kelly Olynyk would do in his offense. And Kelly Olynyk is also an expiring contract that I believe is fully guaranteed now because the deadline passed, and he's supposed to get all $12 million. Colin Sexton is getting less than $19 million, I think, the next 3 years. I think it's 17, 18 and something. And that's kind of like where Norman Powell is. And Norman Powell, that's somebody who's, I think, interesting. Like, his name could come up in all this if you end up dealing with the Clippers. There are a bunch of things I feel like they can still do. Like, can't you just attach to your 2 second rounders or 2 of your second rounders to Victor Oladipo, get off that contract and get something back? Can you get a Maxi Kleber for that? Can you get a Kenyon Martin Jr. and Jayshawn Tate combination for that? Can you get a Kyle Anderson for that? Maybe a DeLon Wright or Monte Morris. I feel like one of those last 2 would actually be super viable, because Washington would be like, all right, we'll take your seconds and we don't want to win anyway. So here's DeLon Wright or Marcus Morris. I think if Kyrie Irving ends up leaving Dallas and goes to the Lakers, like I feel like he's destined to do at any point in his career, then I feel like you can call Dallas and be like, hey, we'll give you Kyle Lowry to be your veteran point guard next to Luka Doncic. Give us back Maxi Kleber and Tim Hardaway Jr. I think that's something you could also investigate also. I don't know why I said also twice. And then there are some bigger things that we could look at, but in terms of like the role player stuff, this is what I kind of be looking at. I wonder if Indiana, who had dangled Chris Duarte out there before, would continue to do so. Would Buddy Hield, who's on an expiring contract, be somebody they want to move? Buddy Hield, by the way, is probably, if I'm looking at this from Miami's offseason perspective in terms of pivot deals, would be at like the top of my list, because the issue that Miami has had is their shooters, as good as they can be unreliable. And I think Buddy Hield next to Jimmy and Bam will make a lot of sense.
Well, if you can get it. Brian, I want to stop you there, because I think that's an interesting one in light of the reports about Strus. So, I mean, we're talking about how they've been willing to move Duarte. and perhaps they'd be willing, and they've been willing to move Hield for a while, almost since they acquired him.
$19 million expiring contract, Buddy Hield.
Well, and getting max. I mean, Greg, could you briefly here, because people are going to ask this question, could you explain the sign and trade limitations on the Heat right now? Because I know that Heat fans are going to go, well, why not just do that? Why not just sign and trade max to Indiana?
It's a good question. And without going into the real gritty details, because of base year compensation rules that are in place, it's going to be difficult to have players going in both directions in a sign and trade. Although the caveat is Indiana has cap space. So they may be able to swing certain iterations of deals with small salaries, rookie deals like Duarte. TJ McConnell is another name I'm going to keep shouting from the rooftops.
Well, Jimmy
loves him.
So,
yeah.
But also he would fit here. He was a 42, I think, % 3-point shooter last year. Like, he's a perfect fit in Miami, and he can even start for stretches. Let's be dead honest. So if Gabe comes back at a number that's as high as max or higher than max, I don't know. All it takes is one team to get in this bidding for Gabe, and that's what you're looking at. The Heat are going to look for a move to balance their books. And so to Brian's point, an expiring contract, what if all of a sudden the deal with Indiana is expanded into a situation where they like Tyler Hero too? Mm-hmm. I'm just speculating. Like, these are so many variables, but the one thing is that the Heat are hamstrung with their ability to take back salaries in a sign and trade. They more likely would want to do a trade exception and then a separate deal. That's how I absorb something that would take place with a team like Indiana, who has interest in one of Miami's free agents.
TJ McConnell also is making $8.7 million this year, has a partial guaranteed $9.3 million the year after. And I think
Depot for him in an asset. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, not even. I think if you're talking about like one of these bigger deals, why can't you figure out a way to just make it for Buddy Hield, TJ McConnell, and Chris Duarte? Maybe or Chris Duarte, I would say. But definitely those first two guys, because that would make a lot of sense.
All right. Keep the rest in the queue. We're going to go rapid fire through some other ideas when we come back. But first, speaking of rapid fire, one of our sponsors, oceansfinest.com. This is how you get your seafood quickly. You get it to your door. It keeps longer, and it's great stuff. If you've seen our posts anywhere, you'll know that. So check it out. Our guy Alfredo Arteaga made the mahi-mahi fingers. You can get crab. You can get lobster, all kinds of other seafood, fish, shellfish, whatever it is you're looking for. You can find it at oceansfinest.com. That's oceansfinest.com. And they got a July 4th deal. The reason that we're squeezing this episode in to let you know, because it's Thursday. You want to get this before July 4th. July 4th is coming up next Tuesday. They can get it to you. Just order it today. Oceansfinest.com. Get $10 off prior to July 4th. If you use the code OceansFinest, that's no apostrophe in there. Oceans Finest. Nobody uses apostrophes anymore anyway. Everybody texts. Ocean's Finest Seafood. Ocean's Finest Seafood. Get $10 off and get the same premium seafood that goes to the cruise lines and also goes to the 5-star restaurants in our area. But now they're delivering directly to your door. So check them out at oceansfinest.com. Use the code Ocean's Finest Seafood. Other thing we want to mention here, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That is we call it our Winnow feed, but it's Off the Floor. This is where we're giving you Q&As with Greg, me, Alex, Brady. In addition to the updates first, we're not hiding anything there. We want to get the subscription numbers up. We're also doing prize picks contests there, all kinds of other stuff. We're starting long posts, which are basically mini columns. You're going to get all kinds of stuff that you don't get anywhere else, and you get it before Twitter. So check them out. The actual link to this is on my Twitter feed, but you can go to winnow.app/off the floor. And yes, we're going to have plenty of written content there, maybe even some from me. Who knows?
Eyeball emoji.
Yes. Is that the big announcement? I actually have to work to do that. I don't know if I want to do that. All right. Back here on 5 on the floor. Let's get to it. Rapid fire. Ready? Let's go. Brian, give me an idea.
Would Paul George interest you still as a pivot?
Give me an idea.
Listen, there's a report about Mark Stein. Mark Stein just said, as we're recording this, that the Clippers are looking for a trade partner for Norm Powell to try to avoid a tax. And it's like, hey, you could try to avoid a tax with Paul George if the Heat are actually willing to, go down those financial roads. again, I don't think Tyler Hero would be somebody that winds up with the Clippers, but is there a 3-team deal? And also, that feels like a Kyle Lowry destination. I don't know what the picks are going to look like for that deal. I don't feel like Paul George should be worth that many picks, but he probably will be because NBA teams are delusional. But I think Paul George is a name that I would still want to look out for.
Such a weird situation for the Clippers because it's kind of like, it's not like he's disappointed when he's played, but he hasn't played enough. And that is going to go down as one of the worst trades in NBA history when they traded SGA and pretty much their entire pick allotment. So it's like they almost have to save face by getting enough back for him so that people don't look back at that trade as bad as it was, even though it was celebrated at the time. And this comes to this, okay? And again, I don't want to say that you don't get Dame because we've all talked about wanting to get Dame. But this is why you don't make the terrible deal just to make the splash for your fan base, because sometimes you get that guy. But we've seen that pick currency, the inflation in pick currency, in terms of how many picks you got to go to give up get a player, like I say, Gobert or others or Paul George. Sometimes it blows up in your face and you end up giving up your whole draft for a decade for nothing. So that's
they sat those deals out. They sat those deals out and still went to the finals. Even though their fans wanted them to make all those deals.
I understand, and let's not go too much further because you're gonna get put in the run it back.
Some of their fans
and taken to the trash. Greg, an idea that's not Paul George.
I just can't escape OG Anunoby. And I know that they say Toronto's hard to deal with. Indy's tried to get in there. There's other teams that have looked at OG. I'm sure Portland's called because I bet that would be considered a viable upgrade to Dame. I just look at him as if we're going to move past this star chasing, star bleeping mindset and build an actual team that fits around Jimmy and Bam, and that's actually the objective, and find a way to do it with cost controlled to a degree, players that you can move forward with that don't project to make 30, 40, $50 million. I like OG Anunoby as a fit. So I don't know how willing they're going to be to move him at this current moment. So that's a name. And then I'm circling around Atlanta. I'm still watching them. I don't particularly love DeJounte Murray, but I do like the guy set to make $90 million over the next 4 years, and his name DeAndre Hunter. So I think that they probably, with the John Collins move, are out of those sweepstakes. What do we think about DeMar DeRozan?
That's the next one I was gonna go to.
And then I'm gonna stop because I just rattled off 3, but I'm trying to get us in here at the end with rapid fire names.
Who asked for a pick? If you do Hero for DeMar DeRozan, straight up, who asked for a pick between them and the Bulls? Is it the Bulls for the long-term salary?
How many years are left on that DeRozan deal?
One
after this, right?
No, I think it's just this one.
I don't think the Heat would want to trade Tyler in that deal. They would want to trade Kyle.
Not for DeMar.
Maybe
if you're doing Lowry for DeMar, you're attaching
Tyler's money.
It's true. The long-term aspect of that money is very interesting as you watch the books forward and what you want to categorize as.
They just gave they're giving Nikola Vucevic 3 more years.
Can I ask from a basketball perspective though? As much as I like DeMar personally, and there is always the playoff.
Yeah,
although it didn't even make the playoffs. I mean, just the fit. Of DeMar, I know
everything
how close
is
Jimmy
weird.
and DeMar are too.
Look, in 2004, this would be amazing. I'm not sure,
Right.
if DeMar DeRozan, I don't know if he hits the requisite threes, but to make that happen. But I think if you're looking at just trade partners, the Bulls are an interesting one because they also have not just DeMar, who I think will be less likely, and not even Zach LaVine, who I'm not particularly a big fan of, but I wonder what they're going to do with Patrick Williams because it doesn't feel like they want to re-sign him. And Alex Caruso has 2 years left on his deal, and if he's not a Heat player by the time he retires,
he's highly interesting. I just remember Strus is probably out the door, so your 3-point shooting is already taken a hit. You trade Hero for DeRozan.
I mean, Strus did some of that himself in the playoffs.
You gotta be careful here, guys.
True, but there was at least the idea that he was going to make threes. I don't know that some of these other guys on the team have that. I don't know. All right. Somebody mentioned Charlotte.
Greg, anybody
Charlotte?
buying Gordon Hayward?
I have Hero, Robinson, and Lowry for Hayward, Rozier, Kai Jones, and Cody Martin.
Wow, that's a big one.
So you get the other Martin.
And financially, somehow that works, which surprised me because they're a little bit apart there. there's going to be some sort of pick compensation added to that. But I think Gordon Hayward's interesting, but like, I mean, I think that'll bum a lot of people out just because of the injuries. And Terry Rozier, I think people are going to be like, oh, small guard, but Terry Rozier can play. And otherwise you get the other Martin Twin and Kai Jones, who's an interesting prospect. I don't think that trade is going to happen. That's what I was having fun with.
They invested in Tyler, y'all. Are we really going to sell off Tyler? I just think that like that is such a weird thing for them to do. And for Riley to come out and say he's a pillar next to Bam and then to sell him off to a team for financial reasons, they're going to use another player will be sacrificed, even if it involves them having to use assets to get off of the player. If no Dame, I don't know. I just don't see them just punting Tyler Hero into the atmosphere.
But to be clear, they'll sacrifice Tyler in a Dame deal. They'll sacrifice
absolutely.
Tyler. But what you're saying is they're not going to sacrifice Tyler just to reconfigure the books.
No, they'll do it with someone else. I mean, if y'all think that I'm wrong or off on that, how counterintuitive would it be for Pat to go on that spiel and then them sell him off to a cap space team? Like, I don't know. Unless you're getting the picks to get Dame, that's not the move at this offseason, I don't think.
Well, it gave me a little bit of hope that it's not going to be all financially related when the Heat came out so strong yesterday against the stretching Kyle thing, which is we're not just in this to save money. Now, saving money may be a consequence of what happens here. They knew they were going to be a tax team. They're going to be a tax team. So when I say save money, it's not get under the tax. It's try to stay under the second apron or not make it too punitive, both with, and we've talked about this many times, with both with the vehicles that will be taken away and also the amount of money that will be spent. So I just want to be clear on that. But I did get a little bit of a better feeling when they came out. They didn't let that linger so long, this idea of the stretching Kyle. All right, we got 1 minute left here. All right, give me your wackiest idea. Brian, I mean, Paul George isn't it? What is it?
Hero, Caleb Martin, and a first for Brandon Ingram.
I got one. How about Hero for Devin Vassell? He's on a rookie contract. San Antonio can take back Hero. They can swap those two out. So you shed salary dramatically. And you get a player coming back from an injury that, yes, I know it's kind of a weird situation, but he was playing really good to start last season. Also, because we're sticking on the theme of San Antonio, Keldon Johnson is a baller if we're talking about another player that they could get. But I don't know how much relief that provides Miami long term.
Yeah, and I'm also not exactly sure if San Antonio, who they view as part of their future right now. I just know when we look at teams that Tyler would make sense on, San Antonio is top of list for me because he's be a young veteran with finals experience on a group that's probably going to grow into something pretty special over the next 2 to 3 years. And Tyler will still be 25, 26 years old at that time. And he can be a guy to carry the scoring load while Wemby is working into that. That's a really interesting, to me, that's the most interesting fit in the league for Tyler Hero if he doesn't stay in Miami. All right. We want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Brian. We could do this another 2.5 hours, but I'm sure we will when free agency starts. We're going to do playback on the night of free agency, Friday. So we're doing playback. Join us there. More YouTube and podcast content, as always, will be coming. Thanks to our sponsors, Better Edge, 5RSN, Prize Picks 5, FIVE, and OceansFinest.com. Use the code OceansFinest Seafood. Get your $10 off before the July 4th holiday. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.